Hello class, welcome back. So let's actually start to set up our client app and start to consume some of the API endpoints that we wrote on the backend. So I'm here on the Nextjs.org page, the Nextjs documentation. I suggest you, if you want to read about it and understand more about the Nextjs framework and its philosophy, you can go ahead and browse the documentation and learn a bit about that. And also, if you don't know about that, I suggest you learn a bit about server-side rendering in general and what advantages it offers over client-side rendering, especially when it comes to SEO and performance. But for now, I'm just going to dive into the tech itself and start to set up our client app. So let's get going with that. So here in Next.js app, I'm going to go to here, this blue button, and and go to setup. So here it shows us how to set up a basic example using an existing repo that has a blog app. I'm not going to do that because it's full of junk that we have to delete. So I'm going to start from the ground up. So we're going to be using this tool called Create Next App. We don't have to install it. We can just use it through npx. And we're just going to run it. So there isn't much to it. So let's actually do that. So I'm going to go to VS Code. I'm going to open the terminal. So in the root directory of our project, let's say npx create-next. Oh, I misspelled that. Create-next-app. And I'm going to call this client. Hit enter. And while that installs, make sure to like this video. And of course, if you haven't yet, subscribe and hit that bell button. Thank you. All right, now that everything is installed, we can actually run it straight away. So let's cd into client and say npm run dev, which actually runs, if you go to the package.json inside the client, it runs next dev for us. So let's take a look at that. So it's done compiling, so we can go to localhost 3000. And there we go. So we get this welcome to Next.js page, and it's got a couple of links to actually the Next.js documentation. Nothing fancy, just a basic boilerplate. So let's take a look at the folder structure. So we have our pages folder, and here we have a couple of pages. Ignore this app.js. Here, for example, we have an index.js, which means that this is the root page, which is exactly this page that we see right here. And what's nice about Next.js as well is that routing is so simple. You can, let's actually copy this entire page. And here we can say, I'm going to start to work on the register page, right? So I'm going to say register.js and paste all of that in. And I'm going to actually delete this footer. And I'm going to delete everything up to this title. And here say, instead of welcome to Next.js, I'm just going to say register page and save that. We can change this name even though it doesn't matter. So register, save. And now if we go to our app and we say /register, there we go. We get register page. That's how easy it is in Next.js to create new pages and new routes. It's simple as that. Of course, we're going to get later into like dynamic routes and stuff like that, but this is just a demonstration on how routing works in Next.js. It's really simple. You don't have to set up anything. So I'm straight away going to actually set up our project with TypeScript so that we can get going with that. Let's go back to the documentation and let's go here, TypeScript. And here it tells us, so here it tells us how we set it up. Again, it's going to ask us to use this example, but we already have our app, so we can skip this. And what does it say? Yeah, so it tells us to create a tsconfig file, and we can actually just create it from here or run that command. So you can, in the root, in the client, make sure not in the root of the whole project, create a new file called tsconfig.json and excuse me, leave it blank. And what we need to do next is we just need to run our app, and it's going to prompt us to install these dependencies. So let's actually quit that and run it again, npm run dev. All right, it already detected that we're using TypeScript because of the tsconfig. And it actually doesn't recommend us installing TypeScript like it says here. But I think that's just because we have TypeScript installed in the root directory. But I'm going to ignore that and install it anyway. So copy that, paste it here, and add onto it TypeScript. And run that and let those types install, and also TypeScript. And now if we run it again, it should actually populate this tsconfig for us. And actually it's already done that. So it's populated this tsconfig with some configuration for TypeScript to work with Next.js. So we don't have to worry about that. So we can just close it. And now it runs. Of course, everything runs the same because TypeScript compiler still recognizes JavaScript. But if we go ahead and change, let's start with, I think they give us an example for app.js. So let's go here, next. So we can grab this, which is how you can set up your app.js, which I'll explain later what this does. So we can just paste this in, and here it's just that app, and it takes this app props interface. Of course, we need to change this to TSX, so change this to .tsx, so that TypeScript compiler recognizes all the syntax. So we've changed app.tsx. Let's change the index as well, which we're gonna change the content of later. So change this to .tsx, and there's nothing here that requires us to make any changes to TypeScript. And the same for this, register.tsx. And if we go back to our app, okay, we get an error of app.js. Maybe just have to rerun it. Okay, yeah, I just had to restart it. All right, there we go. So we get our welcome to Nextjs, and of course, register still works as well. Cool. So before we start to write any markup, I want to set up Tailwind CSS in our app. So let's go to tailwindcss.com. And actually, since Tailwind CSS, I think 2.0, they have now, let's go to, where's setup? Installation. What's nice now, they have specific installations for different frameworks, and they also have one for Nextjs. And it makes it easier for us. If you've used Tailwind before, we used to have to run a command each time we want to build our Tailwind CSS. But now we don't have to do that, which is really nice. So we can only, so here it tells us to create our project. We've already done that. And it tells us to install these dependencies. If we run in Nextjs version 10, which we are, which just came out like a month ago. And I don't know if we're actually going to use any version 10 features, but we'll see. So we can actually just copy this, npm install all of these dependencies, stop the server, and just paste those. So there's Tailwind, post CSS, and auto prefixer, and they take care of like building the CSS for us every time we run our app. So let's go back to the documentation. We need to run this Tailwind CSS init command. So copy that and paste it in the terminal. And there we go. Now this creates for us a tailwind.config.js file that has the config that we can extend later and add our own custom stuff onto it. By the way, I'm using these two VS Code extensions. The first one is Tailwind CSS Intellisense, which is really nice. In any project where you have a Tailwind config file, it detects it and it starts to give you autocomplete and even nice color preview stuff when you're writing classes inside of your markup. And also I'm using another one called Headwind, this one right here, and it simply just reorganizes your classes so they always have the same kind of the same order. I'll demonstrate this in a little bit. So I just have those two installed. So I'm going to close this, open my Explorer again. And so this is the config. We don't need to do anything right now in the config. And okay, there's also this. We need to give the Tailwind config our like files or our app frontend files directory, so that later when we build a production file, it automatically detects all the unused CSS selectors for us, and it removes the ones that it removes those, so that our CSS files are much smaller, which is really nice. It's something called tree shaking, by the way. So let's go to our Tailwind config, and here let's replace this purge with what we just copied. And the way I'm going to do this, actually, there are two approaches in having your apps, your pages in your Nextjs app. You can just have a pages folder like this, but you can also create a source directory and put your pages inside of there, and also styles and everything that has to do, everything that you write yourself. So styles has to be actually inside of this source. And this would work exactly the same, so you don't have to worry about routing. Nextjs will detect this change and also look and it will look for the pages inside of source/pages, so you don't have to worry about that. All right, I actually tried to reload this, but my my server is not running. So let's say npm run dev. By the way, I'm calling it server, but it's actually a server. Nextjs has to be served from, it uses Express to serve the different pages because they need to be built on a server. All right, so we get our register page like we did, and also our index, so not much has changed. Let's check if we already have Tailwind included. So open the DevTools, and I'm gonna give this a class of text5xl, and let's see. Okay, that didn't apply, so let me see why that's the case. Okay, I forgot. Okay, I didn't finish all the steps. I'm getting ahead of myself. We need to include There are two ways. We can include the entire Tailwind CSS that is already compiled for us, or we can include these three, I don't know what you call them, directives, I suppose, inside of our CSS if we want, because I don't know, maybe later we're gonna write some custom classes, so I'm just gonna use the second approach. So let's just copy these lines, and let's go to our global CSS, which is inside of styles, global CSS, and replace everything with these 3 lines of code and save. And now if we go back to our app and we refresh, and now if I give this a text-5xl and save, there we go. So that applied. So which tells us that Tailwind is included already. All right, so the first page that I want to work on is the register page. So if we go to Reddit, not /r/class, which we should actually sign up to /register. So there is this page, and we're not going to do Google or Apple OAuth stuff, so I'm going to ignore this. And we're also not going to do like this multi-step form where you continue and then you fill out the rest, which looks strange. I'm just going to put all those, oops, actually when I pressed back it didn't go to here. I'm just going to put all those 3 inputs on the same page and make it look like this. And by the way, for the side image, I'm going to use, not this one, but I'm going to use this tiles image that I'll link in the description. So let's go ahead and download this. So go to free download. I'm going to download this the 1280 by 960. No, I'm not a robot. Like hit download. And I'm going to drag this onto our project and in the source directory. And I'm going to create here a new folder called, actually, this should be in the public. So let's drag this into the public. Actually, I'm going to create a new folder in the public called it images and chuck this there. And I'm going to rename this to, what is this? bricks.jpg. All right, save that. And let's save our Tailwind config and close it. Actually, I just realized one thing. This is why I moved from here. So we have everything in the source directory. So we can just here say, instead of pages, we'll say source / whatever dot whatever file that is .tsx instead of JS. And we can remove this because components will be inside of our source as well. So save this. And now let's go, let's start to work on our register page. So we have that side image. So if we go back to the register page, we'll have a div that contains kind of like 2 divs, this one that has the image and then this one that has the form. So let's go back to our register page. And here, by the way, I can change this to register, and this will be the title of the page. So if you go back, you'll see in our let's go to our register page, and you'll see now that the title of the page says register. So that's one thing that's nice as well. You can use this head element that Next provides to change some like metadata and also like document properties, which before with React you could use something like React Helmet, but this is already baked into Next. So let's start to create our page. So I'm going to remove this main, and I'm going to create a div where the image lives. So here we'll say div. I'm going to give this a width. I've already calculated the width of that, and this will be w-40. By the way, if you're completely new to Tailwind, I suggest you go ahead and do the Tailwind CSS tutorial that I have on this channel, because otherwise this will be a bit confusing for you. But if you're not, then just carry on, I guess. So here we have a width of w40. Let me close these 2 panels. And also I'm going to give it .h-screen to take the entire height of the screen. And now I'm going to give this div actually an inline style to put that image as the background image, so we can't kind of drag it with the mouse. It kind of like is more seamless, and that's the way that Reddit does it, so I just went for the copy. So here we can say background image, and this will be a URL, actually URL lowercase. So this is in our root directory in the images. So let me do, actually this needs to be double quotes. So I can do single quotes inside and say /images /bricks.jpg, and close the parentheses and save, and let's look at this. All right, so we get our image, but it's kind of centered in the middle. So what we need to do, actually, we can make this wrapper div. By the way, you can remove these styles from this home module CSS. I'm going to remove this and replace it with, we're going to give this a flex so that this will go to the right. Cool. And also I'm going to change the positioning of this, because if you look, I want to get kind of like the middle, like this middle color where there's like more red and not just like all blue. So you can simply use these classes. So So we'll see actually say BG cover, so that it's always cover. It fits. If the screen is too big, it doesn't repeat. And we will also say BG center, so we can get the center of the image. Cool. So now we get some red and some green, and it looks like better. So let's start to create the form itself. So underneath this div, I'm gonna add another one. So div. Actually, we don't need to say div. We could just say dot, and this is gonna be of a display of flex. So say dot flex. I'm gonna say dot flex column as well, so that stuff goes top to bottom. And I'm gonna start by having that header one at the top that says sign up. So I'll put a header one. And by the way, in Tailwind, like everything is normalized, so even the header one has the same size as a paragraph. So we need to give this a text size. So here, let's say class name, and I'll give this a text large, so text-lg, and I'm gonna give it some margin on the bottom of 2, and this will say sign up. All right, save that. Let's look at it. All right, that looks okay, but we need to center everything in the middle, and we need to give this some padding. I'm gonna give this wrapping div justify. I don't know why I'm not getting autocomplete. Actually, let me restart my VS Code. Okay, there we go. Now I'm getting autocomplete. Okay, let me run that server, the front-end server again. So cd client and npm run dev. So here we'll say justify center, and we'll also say padding left of 6. So pl-6, save that. You see when I saved it, actually rearranged these two and these two as well to maintain the same kind of structure. I think it's positioning. Yeah, there's positioning and then size, and then like style stuff comes last. I forgot the exact order, but it's something like that. So let's go back to our app. And now, cool. So everything is centered in the middle, and there's like some padding on the left. Let's add the rest. So we have, so we're gonna have these 3 inputs, but we're also gonna have this checkbox to agree to sign up to the newsletter, and also this text that says by continuing you agree to our user, which I'm gonna actually copy now. So copy that text, and let's go back. So right underneath the sign up header, I'm gonna have a paragraph of class. I'm gonna give it some massive margin on the bottom, so MB-10. I'm gonna give it text XS for text extra small, and paste that text in and save. And let's have a look at it. Not this one here. All right, so that's a bit too wide. What Reddit does is it restrains this div by, let me kind of find it. All right, let's look at the width. So, okay, we have a fixed width on the form element itself, but I'm gonna give that fixed width to the wrapping div, which kind of does the same anyway. And we have a width of 80, which, so if you check, let's see. So here in our, where we inspect, let's take a div. So it will be this one right here. If you check classes and then you do W, you'll see all the widths that we have, but the largest one would be, I think it's I think it's 90. Yeah, it's this 96. But also between them, there isn't kind of like a step for every single width. So this 280, if you want to calculate it with Tailwind numbers, it will be, so for every unit here, it's 0.25 rem, which is 4 pixels. So if we have here 280 pixels, it will be 280 divided by 16 times 4, which is going to be 70. So 70 does not exist in Tailwind, but luckily we can extend Tailwind and create this. So we can just go to our Tailwind config, so tailwind config.js, and here inside the theme, make sure you go inside the extend and say spacing. This will be an object, and here you give the number, and you also give the actual width itself. So here it's that's 70 like we said, and the width is 280. Or actually, I'm gonna do it in rem. So what is 280? So 280, actually, yeah, just 280 divided by 16. Okay, 17.5. So let's say 17.5 rem. Save this, and now if we go back to our app and we do, let's refresh just in case, let it build. And now if we go and inspect this and we take that div, if we say W-7, there we go, we get 70, and we get our div, and it's actually, we had 72. I didn't know that. Okay, we had 72, but okay, 70 is more accurate. So we get, let's do 70, and now it's got the div of exactly the same. If you scroll down, you'll see here, it's actually 256 because it's counted the padding. Okay, So maybe I should give this padding to a different div. So let's go to our register. Yeah, or actually I'll leave the padding as it is, but I'm gonna wrap everything inside of there with this W-70 so that it doesn't actually make it smaller just because of that padding, because that padding is not applied on that div itself. So let's look at our app. All right, we inspect that div, W70, and actually the width is exactly 280 pixels, exactly like the Reddit form. Cool. So let's create that, what is it? This, this checkbox, the agree to get emails. I'm gonna copy this text and let's go back to our app. And under this paragraph, let's actually create our form. So let's say form. I'm not gonna worry about the submit event for now. And inside the form, we're gonna have, we're gonna put everything in a wrapping div. So this input, we're gonna put it in a div with a margin bottom of 6 because we need spacing between them. And we'll have an input of type checkbox, and we're gonna give it some classes. So give it margin right 1 so that it's not attached to the text, and I'm also actually gonna give it cursor pointer so that when we hover over it we get the pointer cursor. I'm gonna give it an ID so that the label would know to trigger it once the label is clicked. So ID agreement, and close that. And here let's do a label and HTML4 agreement. And inside the label, we're just going to paste that text and change this, of course, Reddit to Reddit like we have it, and save. And let's look at that. Okay, this is way too big. So let's give this label a class name. So class name of, let's give it a text of extra small. All right, that looks much better. And if we click this label, it checks the box. Actually, let's give the label as well cursor pointer. So here we'll say cursor pointer, save. All right, cool. So now if we hover over it, we'll get this pointer, and same goes for the input itself for the checkbox. Cool. So let's carry on and create this this input here. Actually, maybe this sign up text. Let's see. Okay, 18 pixels and font weight 500, and ours is. Okay, that's 18 pixels, and the font weight, yeah, I think the font weight is normal. Yeah, it's 400. So let's give it like a thicker font weight. And that would be, so this one, this header one right here. Let's say font. And here we get our suggestions, and I think it's it should be medium. So, no, actually it's not medium. This is, I think this is 600. No, actually it is medium, because we just don't have that 500, so it's defaulting, I think, to 600. We're going to import the font later, and this will be fixed, so let's not worry about it. So let's continue and create our inputs. I'm actually going to close this. And under this div, I'm going to create another one. So div, and we'll have, actually let's give it some margin bottom. So class name, just 2, because we don't want too much space between the inputs. And here we'll have our input. And we'll give it a bunch of classes actually, because we have a couple of styles. So if we look at the actual one here, so we have some border, that is like gray, and then we have a background that is dark gray, and then we have a placeholder which we'll style later because that involves creating custom CSS, and then we have some padding as well. So let's do that. So we have some padding, so let's say padding 3, and let's give it a border background, so BG gray, and let's give it 100 because it's very light gray. Let's give it some border, and let's say border gray. So that will be darker, so we'll use 300, and let's say rounded, or actually let's use 400. And that should be good. So let's close this input and let's see what that looks like. All right, that looks not quite the same. So I think it has too much. Okay, it has too much padding on the top and bottom. So what we can do, we can just say px3 and then py2. And also, it needs to take up the whole width, just like the whole width of the div. So we need to say width full, so w-f -full. All right, that starts to look better. We need to change this outline, but I think that we need to use, that needs to target a pseudo class, so I'm not going to worry about it right now. Let's give it a placeholder. So placeholder, and this is the email, so we'll say email. And okay, that looks okay. We're going to continue styling later, but for now let's finish creating the markup. So I'm gonna actually, let's give it a type. So this will be of type email, and let's duplicate this 2 more times. So the second one will be the username. So this will be of type text, and the placeholder will say username, and then it's going to be the exact same styling. And then the third one will be of type password, and the placeholder will say password. All right, let's look at that. All right, that looks cool. So now we can create this continue button, but I'm not going to have it say continue. I'm going to have it say sign up, because this is not going to another step. This is finishing the sign up. So the button will go under this div here. So we'll say button, and we'll give it a bunch of styles. So what do we have? Let's see. We have a background of blue. We have some padding. We have rounded corners. We have a width of full, and we also have a hover effect, which makes it a bit lighter. So if we go back to our button, we'll say class name, padding Y2, and we'll give it margin bottom as well. So the text underneath it will not be just right underneath it. And we'll say text extra small, and we'll say font bold, and let's give it text white, because default is actually black. And let's give it uppercase, because everything is like transformed into uppercase inside the button. And let's give it the background of blue 500. Let's see what else we have. We have a border, and we have a border of blue, the same color, 500, because this will change later. I think that's it. So let's close the button, and inside of there we'll say sign up. All right, save that. Okay, so I forgot a couple of things. So one thing is the width full, so W-full, and also rounded. Save that. All right, that looks cool. Okay, so we're gonna generate some like colors in the next one, because this blue is not exactly the same as the default Tailwind blue 500. But for now, I'm just gonna keep it as it is. So what do we have? We have already a Redditor login as a link to the login page. So let's do that. Actually, I'm gonna put that outside the form itself. So here we'll have a small tag, and we'll say already a Redditor question mark, and here we'll put a link, which is our first usage of next link. So let's import from next/link link itself. So here we'll say link, and this takes a property of href, and this will be to /login, which is a page that doesn't exist yet, but we'll create it in the future. And here we'll have an anchor tag, and without an href, because that's how a link works inside of Next.js. And this anchor tag will have a class name of margin left 1, so that it puts some space between the word login and the word Redditor question mark. And here we'll give it a text blue 500, and we'll give it uppercase as well. And inside of the anchor tag, oops, this will say log in. Save that. Let's look at it. Cool, so already a Redditor login, and if we click on that, it goes to /login, which of course doesn't exist yet. All right, cool. So we can start to work on wiring the form itself, but I think this video is getting a bit long, so I'm gonna cut it here. And in the next one, we're gonna actually wire it and let it send requests to our register endpoint that we already have written in the past. Again, please do make sure to like this video and subscribe if you haven't, and I will see you in the next one. Cheers.